Hello everyone, Prime here, and I hope you had a great day. Now, there are a bunch of gods that are super angry in mythology, and too many of them just aren't in Smite. So today we're going to go over some of them that really could be in Smite, because Battleground of the Gods and all. And thanks to these stories, makes a lot of sense. Eurysithon was a son of Triopas, who was a king of Argos, or king of Thesla, and son of Poseidon. Eurysithon was now a king himself, but was arrogant and ran into a lot of his decisions without thinking, being saved most of the time by his very wise daughter. One morning came when the king either leveled a temple of the goddess Demeter or cut down the trees of her sacred grove to build his own feasting hall. As he feasted in that hall, a nymph informed Demeter of what transpired, and the goddess granted her leave to enact some justice. The nymph took Demeter's chariot and found a spirit of hunger, telling it that King Eurysithon was hers to possess. From a safe distance, of course. The spirit was on its hands and knees after all, eating as much as it could. The night of the king's cursing, he dreamt of a meal that tasted empty. That morning, he called for food, endless food, so much that he could sate an entire nation. A calling in the pit of his stomach was never satisfied, and so he ate. His wealth couldn't keep up, and so he sold his lands and properties, his clothes, and his family. The wise daughter, now a slave, just for a simple meal. Demeter spared the princess though, having the slave owner search for a new slave once they reached the harbor. As men searched for the valuable daughter, a person with a beard and thick manly hands stood in her stead. He told the slave owner that their slave had fled into the city, and off they went. But as soon as this man took a step, the princess was revealed. With the princess now free from her near-slave experience, she found her father and told him that she could cure him, free him from his endless need to eat. But days later, the king, or former king at this point, was still selling his possessions for food, from great mares to simple sheep. Eventually, he had an accident and ate a finger, then ate his own hand, and soon enough, there was no more of the former king. Which, by the way, you have to wonder, if he ate himself to death, then how would that have even been possible? How could he eat his mouth? How could he even eat his neck? Would he just be dead at that point? Would he just eat a vital organ and then no longer be alive? Or would the spirit be keeping him alive long enough to do all of that and eventually just leave or something? Probably best not to think about that. Pan and his flute. Pan was a minor god in Greek mythology and a follower of the god Dionysus. He had the legs, feet, and waist of a goat and the chest and head of a man. He was a pretty horny god, if you catch my meaning, which was paired with his remarkably unattractive face. He chased after many disinterested nymphs who were usually transformed into some sort of inanimate object. The one that we'll talk about being Sphinx. A wood nymph flees from Pan, and some goddesses turn her into a river reed amongst river reeds to help her escape. Pan, though, eventually gets frustrated by the fact that, well, he doesn't have his nymph to play with, and turns her, along with some other river reeds, into a flute. The instrument was associated with Pan, but it also meant a dead nymph. And as I said, she wasn't the only nymph to be fleeing from this goat man. This is Greek mythology, you weren't exactly expecting a happier ending, were you? In one myth of Egyptian creation, Ra comes into being and names the essential gods of the earth. Shu, the first winds. Tefnut, the spitter, responsible for the first rain. Geb, the earth itself. Nut, the sky. Happy, the river Nile. Once everything was ready, he named mankind. But eventually, mankind disrespected Ra. Betrayed him. This would not do. Ra sent down his daughter, Sekhmet, and humanity was bled viciously. The Nile turned red with the blood of humanity, which Ra soon took pity on, all of this slaughter and the death of mankind. Sekhmet was eventually asked to stop, but, well, she didn't, and continued the massacre. So, she had to be completely and utterly wasted because she started to drink the blood that poured into the river Nile, and there was some booze mixed in with the blood, so eventually she was stopped that way. The moral of the story is that you shouldn't mess with Ra, and that you should probably try to at least like cats, even if you're not a cat person. Brahm and Vishnu had great prides, leading them to clash over who of the two of them was the supreme deity. The dispute reached a point that Shiva felt it necessary to step in, transforming into a large linga, of fire that reached the heavens and the underworld. The lingam told the gods that whoever reached the end of the object would have proven their supremacy. Vishnu and Brahm took opposite ends of the flaming pillar and searched for years until Vishnu realized that Shiva's greatness superseded his own and conceded, whilst Brahma, unsatisfied, played a trick on Shiva. On his journey, he discovered the Ketaki flower at the highest point of the lingam. He requested that the flower vouch for him before Shiva, claiming that Brahm had made it to the highest point of the lingam and seen its end. The flower agreed. When placed before Shiva to inform him of Brahm's deeds, Shiva was enraged as he would not be deceived and cursed Brahm, saying that no human would worship him. The Ketaki flower would also not be used in any ritual as punishment for its betrayal. In some variations of this story, Shiva is born out of this conflict instead of consciously transforming himself. Brahm becomes a goose to fly up to the top of the lingam, whilst Vishnu becomes a boar to dig his way into the earth to reach the underworld and find the end of the lingam. Also in this variation, Shiva doesn't show his angry side, so there really isn't much reason for me to tell you other than the fact that it's a variation of this very story. Brahm creates a beautiful goddess, being Shatarupa, that he was infatuated by and spawned heads to stare at her. Whenever she tried to escape his gaze, Brahm simply formed a fifth head for his own amusement. Before we continue with the story, is that really disgusting? Does this goddess that was created count as Brahm's daughter? Or see, Brahm doesn't seem like the type to necessarily be perverted in that sense, or creepy in that sense. Brahm did create this deity, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'd have to necessarily have a father-daughter relationship. It could be similar to the relationship that an artist would have to a painting, for instance. It's not the same connection, it's very different. And so, gazing upon your work of art, your creation in that sense, isn't creepy, but it's more just in awe of your talent, just admiring this beautiful creation that you've put into the world, or, intriguing creation that you've put into the world, shall we say? So, if you look at it in that sense, is it necessarily too bad? So, I guess what I'm trying to question here is, what is this? Is this more of the relationship an artist would have with a painting, or is it more of a relationship a father would have with a daughter? Either way, Shiva isn't pleased about this, and that's putting it lightly. He gets very, very angry and cuts off the fifth head of Brahm. Brahm still loses his whole status in being able to be prayed to by men, except in this story he has one less head. Which, considering the fact that Brahm is the creator deity, it's a bit unfortunate for him. There's a story, including Saraswati, that details the goddess changing her forms many times to avoid exciting her godly creator, Brahm. Eventually, she gets so mad that she curses him, and that's another explanation as to why Brahm isn't worshipped. So maybe he is a bit of a... Also, if Brahm was a bit of a pervert, then I suppose that also explains why Shiva was so quick to attack him after being frustrated by seeing what he was doing with his own creation. Also, there may actually exist a temple dedicated to Brahm in the world, so Shiva's word wasn't exactly 100% final there. But that's not to say that you should mess with Shiva in any way, shape or form. He isn't called the Destroyer for nothing, and when his third eye is opened, you'd better be out of his way, because there was this one time where he destroyed a goddess or god just by looking at them with the third eye. So, yeah, don't mess with Shiva. And those were pretty much the angriest gods or goddesses that aren't in Smite from the different mythologies that are currently in the game. Of course, it wasn't going to talk about Mesopotamian gods or goddesses that are really angry, for instance, but yeah. Did you enjoy the video? Go ahead and leave a like. And also, you're probably wondering why this is the first upload in a while. I'm usually fairly consistent with these things. Well, I was working on something, didn't exactly work out, so after that I took a mini break. So, yeah. Might be able to try that in the future, but for now, you won't see it. Still, I'm going to try and upload fairly consistently. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this, and till the next video, be sure to tell me which god you thought was the most angry. Do you think there's an angrier god or goddess that exists in one of the mythologies that's already in Smite that I didn't mention? Go ahead and tell me your thoughts in the comments below, but till the next one, have a very good day. I have been Prime, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.